Have you ever just stopped for a second on a walk and really looked around you? I mean, really looked. At all the different kinds of trees, the birds flying by, the little insects buzzing around? It's amazing, right? Our world is just bursting with life in all shapes and sizes. In this explainer, we're going to dive into what that's all about. We're going to uncover some of the hidden rules and patterns that connect every single living thing.
So here's our game plan. We'll start by just appreciating how much life is out there. Then we'll see why scientists needed a way to organize it all. From there, we'll put on our detective hats, first snooping around the plant world, then the animal kingdom. We'll get to the bottom of why everything is so different. And finally, we'll talk about our place in this giant interconnected web. Sound good? Let's go.
Okay, so our story actually kicks off with a class taking a nature walk. They're guided by a scientist, Dr. Raghu, and a local expert, Manoram Chacha, and they're just observing. They see monkeys leaping in the trees, butterflies with amazing patterns, and they hear all these different bird calls. Everything starts right there, with just paying attention to what's around you.
Now, all that incredible variety, all the different plants, animals, insects, everything you see, there's a scientific word for that. It's called biodiversity. It's really just a simple way of saying all the different kinds of life in one place. It's the richness of the living world.
But that richness, it brings up a huge problem. I mean, we're talking about millions and millions of different species on this planet. You couldn't possibly study them one by one. Can you imagine trying to learn about every single type of beetle? It's impossible. So how in the world do scientists make sense of it all?
Well, you do it the same way you'd tackle a gigantic library. You wouldn't just throw all the books in one big pile, right? No way. You'd sort them. You'd create sections, putting books with similar themes together. That's exactly what scientists do with life. They sort it into groups.
All right, let's start our investigation. We're going to be detectives now, and we'll start with the plant kingdom, where some of the best clues are hiding in plain sight.
So the most basic way to group plants is just by looking at them. You have the short ones with soft green stems. We call those herbs. Then you have the medium-sized ones that are kind of bushy with hard, woody stems. Those are shrubs. And of course, the big, tall ones with a thick trunk, you guessed it, those are trees. Pretty straightforward.
But come on, that's just scratching the surface. The really cool stuff, the real secrets, start to show up when you zoom in a little bit, when you look at the details you might normally ignore. This is where things get interesting.
Okay, take a look at these leaves. If you look closely at the veins, you'll pretty much always see one of two patterns. On the left, it looks like a little net. That's called reticulate veination. On the right, the veins all run side by side in straight lines. That's parallel veination. Two completely different designs.
Now, let's dig down. Literally, let's look at the roots. Here, too, we find two main types. Some plants have one big main root that goes straight down, called a taproot, and others have a whole mess of smaller, stringy roots that spread out, called a fibrous root system.
So we have different leaf patterns and different root systems. At first, you might think they have nothing to do with each other. But here's where the real detective work pays off. What if there is a connection? What if these clues link up to tell a bigger story?
And bam, it turns out there is a hidden code. These things are almost perfectly connected. Plants with those net-like leaves almost always have a taproot, and they grow from seeds that you can easily split in two, called dicots. And what about the others, the ones with parallel leaf veins? They almost always have those fibrous roots, and they grow from a single-part seed, a monocot. It's a complete system, hidden right under our noses.
Pretty cool, right? Now, let's switch gears. Let's see if we can apply that same kind of detective thinking to the animal kingdom.
Well, one of the easiest ways to start grouping animals is to just watch how they move. Do they walk or jump around on legs, like a goat or an ant? Do they fly with wings, like a pigeon or a fly? Do they use fins to swim, like a fish, or do they crawl with their whole body like a snake? Just by looking at how they get from point A to point B, we can start to make some really useful groups. Okay, so we've seen how we can start and group living things, but that just leads to a much deeper question. Why? Why is there so much variety in the first place? Why isn't there just one kind of bird or one kind of tree? Well, the answer, as it often is in nature, comes down to survival.
And a key word for survival is adaptation. Adaptations are basically the special features, the unique tools that a plant or an animal has that lets it live successfully in its own little corner of the world. It's about having the right gear for the job. And this is a perfect example of adaptation in action. Look at these two camels. The one from the hot desert has one hump and not a lot of hair, which helps it stay cool. But the camel from the cold desert, it's got two humps for extra food storage and a thick, shaggy coat to stay warm. It's the same basic animal, but it's been fine-tuned for two completely different worlds.
So each set of these adaptations is designed for a specific address in nature. And that address, the place that provides the food, water, and shelter that a living thing needs, is called its habitat. The desert is a camel's habitat. A pond is a fish's habitat. And this right here is why we have biodiversity. Every single environment on Earth, from a scorching desert to a freezing mountaintop, has its own unique set of problems to solve. And life, in its incredible way, has come up with a different, perfectly adapted solution for just about every single one.
And that brings us to our final and maybe most important point. We've seen this beautiful, complicated system. We understand a little more about how it works. So now we have to ask, what does it have to do with us? Why does any of this matter? It matters because this whole intricate web of life is actually pretty fragile. Each one of those species is perfectly adapted for its habitat. So if you mess with the habitat, if you damage or destroy it, the results can be absolutely devastating. And this isn't just a what-if scenario, it's real. Our source material points to animals in India, like the Bengal tiger, the cheetah, the great Indian bustard. All of them have seen their numbers drop like a rock. And the main reason? Their homes, their habitats, are shrinking or disappearing altogether. So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that everything is connected. The health of the tiniest insect affects the bird that eats it, and that bird affects the health of the whole forest. When you lose one little piece of this giant puzzle, the entire picture starts to change. Every single plant and animal we've talked about has its own amazing story of survival, a story written in its DNA over millions of years. And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. As the one species that can change the entire planet, what role are we going to choose to play?